Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm back here at Fort Tilden Beach on the Rockaway Peninsula of Queens, where it was just about 2 weeks ago. And conditions are quite a bit different. Although it's a little bit warmer, it is also quite a bit, it's very blustery. The tide is coming in, and today, although I've already shot a couple of pictures of oyster catches, which I'll post probably as I'm talking to you right now, I just grabbed that up for the opportunity. But I'm here really to try to shoot landscape here, since it's my first opportunity to do so. Tide is coming in. I got my camera set up here next to this breakwater, and I'm going to show you my setup and what my initial composition is going to be. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to move fast a few times. I was hoping I'd be able to get a sunset, but the way the clouds are coming in, that looks kind of unlikely. So I think I'm going to be doing some minimalistic seascapes and maybe some long exposure stuff. So let's go to my first setup. I've got to work pretty fast on this. As you can see, the tide is coming in pretty quickly. I'm going to have to move probably within a few minutes. But I'm set up right now with my 16-35 zoom lens, focused about midway up the jetty. And I want to try and time this so that I take the exposure as the water is receding. That'll give some nice streaks in the water near the rocks. So for that reason, instead of using a 2-second timer, I'm using my remote shutter release because I want to be able to exactly time my trigger. First, now let me untangle it. All right, so this next wave that comes in, as it's whipping around, the rocks start to recede. I think that's going to look pretty nice, so I'm going to get the next one. My settings right now are at ISO 100, f11, 1/8 of a second, and I'm using my 16-35 lens. So I'm going to take a few exposures, and starting with this one right now, and hopefully I'll get a few decent ones before I have to move, because the tide is rising. So stay tuned, and you're going to see my best efforts at this location right after this.
For my first image, I liked the different aspects of the wave action in two different images. So after equalizing their basic exposures in Lightroom, I blended them in Photoshop to get this composite. For the next image, I loved the action of the water left of the jetty, but I hated the spray flying over the rocks themselves. So again, I selected an image with unobstructed jetty rocks and masked those rocks into my final image via Photoshop.
Well, I think I got some good images there, but I had to retreat because the water is basically, I'm wearing boots that are about mid-calf high, and the water's coming right up over us, and my feet are wet already. So I'm backing off a bit, and I think now I'm going to try to do some long exposures, and this actually should be pretty interesting. It's not something I've done a lot of, but given the light and given the conditions, I think it's going to be pretty much ideal for it. So I'm going to set up my camera right behind where I'm standing, and then I'll show you what I'm doing with that. All right, so I've moved back a bit, and I've got my tripod as far dug into the sand with the spikes on as I can, because it's very important that the camera not shake during a long exposure. I'm again focused about midway up the jetty from where I'm sitting, and the first thing I did was take a base exposure without an ND filter, and that came out at f11 and ISO 100 to be about 1/6 of a second. So I want to try and get how to adjust my exposure to get about a 30-second exposure. So using my photo pills app that I have on my phone, it came out to about 43-second exposure, 43 seconds if I change the ISO to 400 and my shutter speed to 43 seconds with a 10 stop filter. So that's what I did. I've already mounted it because, again, since the water is so volatile right now, that I'm not sure how long I'm going to be able to stay here, and I really want to make sure that my camera is secure. So I'm set up, and I'm going to trigger the shutter as the water's coming in. And with a 43-second exposure, actually 45 seconds, because I know I'm losing the light a little bit, so I added a little bit of extra time. So hopefully that's going to give me a decent enough exposure. And I'll try this a few more times, but maybe varying the exposure a little bit. It's fortunate that my camera has a built-in bulb timer, so otherwise I'd have to use a manual, figure it out manually and use an intervalometer release or something. But I have that built into my camera, which is a 5D Mark IV. So let me go trigger that right now, and you'll see the results of my best effort right after this.
As I set up for this long exposure, it was an hour before sunset and the light was rapidly fading. As a result, my first shot was very underexposed. I adjusted my exposure time on a second exposure to 2 minutes to attain this result.
Well, by now, you've already seen the images I just took. I'm pretty happy with how they look on the back of the camera, and I'm sure after I process them, I'll be equally pleased. One thing I didn't expect is that the long exposure is actually bringing out the color in the sky. There's really not that much color in the sky as I look at it with a naked eye, but as you can see behind me, and as you've seen in the images, maybe it's a long exposure and slightly underexposing the images kind of really brought out what color there is in both the sky and in the water. And of course, my use of a polarizing filter will help accentuate that. So I want to try and get one more composition before I call it, because when I left the house a little while ago, it was actually pretty mild where I was. It's like temperature in the 60s. Right here by the shore, it feels like it's about 45. My fingers are cold. I'm really underdressed. I'm really underdressed. So I'm going to try and get one more composition before I call it a day. Last set of compositions. I've just moved over to the other side of the jetty, and the tide is coming in pretty quick. In fact, a little while ago I had to move my camera back because it was about to get soaked. So I'm going to take a couple of regular exposures. First one's going to be, again, moved aimed about midway up the jetty here at f11. 0.4 of a second at ISO 100. I'm going to take that first, and then I'm going to put on again an ND filter, see if I can get at least about a 30-second or so exposure. It's going to look very different. But I'm going to put both images up by comparison. Starting with this first one, which I'm taking right now. That looks pretty good. I'm going to try and time for when the water is either coming in or going out. Going out is usually a little more interesting. Put the live view back on. I'm going to wait for a good wave. This one, I think that's coming in is going to be decent. And maybe not. Okay, here we go. I think this is going to be a good one right here. Get some nice swirls in the water and along the sand. We'll zoom out just a little bit. Oh, these are all going to be nice. Oh yeah, that's the best one yet. Okay, so now that I've gotten some nice receding and incoming water action, I'm going to slap on ND filter and see what I can get, again, for about a 30-second or so exposure. So my calculator told me that to get about a 1 minute and 20-second exposure, I would need to change the ISO to 100 and use a 400 and use a 10-stop filter. So instead, because I know the light is going, I'm going to first take one and actually got 2 minutes. So I'm going to trigger that right now. Hopefully I've got my tripod dug in enough that the surf won't dislodge it, because again, if the camera moves, my image is kind of screwed up. But here we go. And whatever I wind up doing, I'm probably going to try and, there's a certain amount of guesswork. I mean, the app is good for initial settings, but when you consider that the light is either coming or going depending on what time of day it is, and it's already getting closer to sundown, you know, you have to kind of guesstimate and add a little bit of time if you know the light is losing, or maybe subtract a little bit of time if you know the light is rising because it's early in the morning. So whatever my final image is and exposure settings that I use, you'll see them at the end of this clip.
This image is the one I said was the best one yet of the short exposures. I really love the pattern of foam left by the retreating surf, without which the composition would be very left heavy. It was less than 30 minutes before sundown by the time I took this long exposure, so my 2-minute exposure was still too dark. After several attempts, I increased the exposure to 3 minutes. I processed this image in both color and black and white. Which do you like best and why? Let me know in the comments below.
And after that, I think I'm going to get out of here because I'm losing feeling in my fingers. I didn't think it was going to be this cold here, I really didn't. But that's what happens when you're still in the end of March. Even though inland it's kind of warm, get out here by the water, different story. I hope you like the content that you've seen, and if so, I hope you give me a subscription and hit that notification bell so that the next time I upload, you'll get it notification right away, which is what notification bells for. So thanks again for everything. See you next time. Later.